Welcome to Straight Lines. I'm Tim Neiman. This is where life lessons meet leadership, where business gets a dugout seat, and where baseball gives us more than box scores, gives us blueprints. Whether you're managing a team, building a brand, or just trying to lead yourself better, you're in the right place. Because here on Straight Lines, we believe the shortest distance between purpose and progress is truth, clarity, and action. Super excited to have Dedan Brozino with us today. He is an outstanding young man, carving out quite the legacy of his own. Currently, Dedan's the president of the Rose Bowl Legacy Foundation and chief development officer of the Rose Bowl Stadium. Spent a lot of years at Cal State Long Beach, basically Long Beach State for all of us in yesteryear, as a senior associate AD for external relations. Helped them plan capital projects totaling more than 27 million, and he's doing that and much more with the Rose Bowl. He's won some honors along the way, and he's a certified fundraising executive. So, Dean, welcome to coming aboard here. I'm juiced to have you with us.
Thanks. Great to be here, Coach, and good to hear your voice again. It's been quite some time, but honored to be with you today.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of time, but that's okay. Fortunately, I think any organization team, becomes quite the brotherhood, in the long term. And fortunate
Mhm.
to have great guys like you and others that, are doing really, really well and learned all those life lessons of, it's more than wins and losses. It's, about relationships basically. And
Yep,
I am grateful for ours for sure. So I
absolutely.
wanted to get into, I always do with all the guests, Dean, is just kind of a little background personally, how the heck you got here, what's this path like, growing up in the metropolis of Lehighton, Pennsylvania, probably the best city, named for your probably little next door to your probably suburb of Jim Thorpe. It's probably what Lehighton's known for.
Yeah,
How you chose to sales at the time and
yeah,
then of course on to, Long Beach State. So, kind of take us through that a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah. No, I'd be happy to. We say Jim Thorpe is a suburb of Lehighton, so it's but no, it's not the most flashy place. It's got a pretty grounded sense of community, and really the whole northeastern Pennsylvania area. And yeah, I think a lot of Americana is grounded in that sense of community. Not everybody's born in New York City or Philly or San Francisco or LA, and yeah, I think when you don't benefit from an upbringing in those big time city lights, you don't necessarily have a straight line, right? And I think, I grew up in a pretty grounded sense of community because of that Lehighton work ethic. You bumped into the same people all the time at church, at the grocery store, at Walmart, wherever it might be. And in a town that's 3, 4,000, 5,000 people, you kind of get thrown pretty quickly into just being a relationship based individual. I think, you know, um, life comes at you fast for a number of reasons, but one of the things that we all kind of need in those foundational moments of our upbringing are how to be relational with people, how to be genuine with people. And I owe a lot of that to the Lehighton upbringing. My family wasn't flashy. We valued showing up, being consistent, doing things the right way. I got a lot of that from my grandfather as well, who was a veteran. I'll talk a little bit about that later. Um, but in high school, I was really drawn to sports, like any young boy. Three sport athlete: baseball, basketball, football. It wasn't just the competition; it was more the sense of connection that it created, and it led me to making some college decisions that kept me close to that energy. One being in your program there. That was actually my first time on an airplane. Was when we made the College World Series in '03. So yeah, I owe my air travel to you, Coach. But I was just fascinated by the intersection of sports and life and purpose, and I felt like sports and ultimately what was decided upon as baseball in my college career versus those other two sports really was a microcosm of what my upbringing was in that small town of Lehighton in the coal region, which was being around people, every day, all the time, and figuring out how to make it work. When I was with DeSales and played baseball with you guys there for that short season and a half, I was in the bullpen, and those were some of my most fun memories of college because you're with the same core group of guys, not the team as a whole, but you're with the same core group of guys out in that bullpen each and every day, and you got to find stuff to talk about. There's only so much you can roll through again and again and again as a college freshman, college student, and we weren't exactly talking arithmetic and science and biology class out there, and so I feel that Lehighton upbringing really transitioned well into DeSales, and what really kind of got me ready for sports business and life. Didn't really have what it took after that freshman year. Very thankful for that experience, but through that freshman year, got to know you, got to know BJ Spiegelmeyer in the athletic department there. I owe a lot of the ignition to my career to BJ, and he knows that. I'm very grateful for that, and you're really leveraging those final 3 years at DeSales after the post baseball life, and those cleats were hung up to collect dust formally. Really leveraging those final 3 years to be involved and learn as much as you possibly can. I think young people in today's world, they don't realize and acknowledge the importance of leveraging those college years, not just for fun and sociability and the ability to learn real world techniques. I think at times at that age, you're blinded to the accessibility you have to a tremendous amount of mentorship and guidance and information that you can really carry with you. And I've been fortunate to benefit from that for the last 20 years, moving on from DeSales to Long Beach State for a decade, and now at America's Stadium for a decade as well. But yeah, those small town roots were really kind of what carved just being a relationship driven person, not a transactional type person.
There's no doubt about it, Eden. And the salt of the earth folks, as I like to call them, you certainly are one of them. Your parents, my parents, we went to work, we went to school, we did what we had to do, whether we liked it or not. And there's no surprise that why you are successful as you are right now. Pretty amazing story, actually, as you've gone on to Long Beach and now with the Rose Bowl. So it was Long Beach to the Rose Bowl. It wasn't anything between that, correct?
No,
That
nothing
was
between there. Yeah, I got to Long Beach State wanting to be a Division I athletic director. I still kind of have that itch here and there. I do miss being on a college campus. There's a vibrancy to that, and energy to that. But yeah, I moved out west. I met my wife Danielle as a freshman at DeSales. She was on the volleyball softball team, and we dated for almost the entirety of our time at DeSales, and we moved west after graduation. Got my graduate degree at Long Beach State University in sport management, and just kind of started working for free. I wanted to be in communications because of the influence that BJ Spiegelmeyer actually had on me. I wanted to write press releases, be involved with the media, things of that nature. I just like the written word. I think there's still to this day a very powerful meaning to the written word, as you've indicated in your books and things. And I went out to Long Beach State seeking a communications opportunity in PR, and they didn't have anything. So they sent me down the hallway to marketing, and to be honest, I didn't even know what the word marketing meant at the time, but it sounded like an opportunity. So I went and I took it and kind of fell in love with, maybe not necessarily the behind the camera writing, that it was more the forward facing, the public nature of what marketing was, and then ultimately ticket sales and fundraising. And I started learning the external side of the business in college athletics, and kind of fell in love with it. I mean, I think if you would have turned back the clock 20 years and told me, said, "Hey, Dedan, you're going to be a fundraiser at the Rose Bowl protecting that 103-year-old venue," I would have laughed you out of the room, because asking for money just sounded like the most unsavory thing that I could ever possibly do in life. But um, I think it's in kind of going back, that there's no straight lines to these opportunities. I got into Long Beach State looking to want to work in comms and PR, and ultimately get to an athletic directorship chair. And here I am at the Rose Bowl 20 plus years later, doing something that wasn't even on my radar as a young kid. And yeah, I think I'm very thankful for that, and my family is. But at the same time, I felt like it could have been very easy in hindsight to get my own way and maybe impede that progress in a certain way. And so, yeah, I left college athletics. I've been at the Rose Bowl for about 10 years after spending a decade at Long Beach State. And like I said, I still miss that college campus atmosphere and the energy surrounding that college campus life. But I feel like I do get to touch that with a dotted line here at the Rose Bowl.
yeah, no question. I'm not sure you want to maybe at a small school, Division III school, you don't have all the extra, you know, assorted garbage lately. The NIL, the portal. I
Yeah.
mean, wow, there's just so much going on that I don't know that I could have handled it even in the heyday. Certainly not now anymore. And it's gotten awfully, awfully complicated. But as you say, it's nice being around, the
Mhm.
atmosphere, and there's always something going on. And as you do too. And fundraising is an interesting animal. I did that for several years, as you know, at the sales. And
Mhm.
if you don't have relationships, you got no shot. You really don't. And I think people need to like you, and I think people will give to things that tug at their heartstrings a little bit. But you also got to be a salesman, and can't be afraid to ask for the money from time to time. But I think people feel good about, certainly in your case with the Rose Bowl, but anywhere where they're helping people, I think it works for sure. First
Yeah.
impressions when you walked into the ballpark, into the stadium.
Oh gosh, I mean, it was the emotions were all you could imagine. Probably very similar to the hundreds of millions of people that have been through there. It felt like standing in history. That was a very tangible emotion you felt when you got into the Rose Bowl. We actually turn 103 years young tomorrow on October 28th. It's kind of a neat birthday celebration there to see the vibrancy that the venue still has after 103 years. But I think standing in there, but also knowing the opportunity that was in front of me with largely a blank canvas. The Rose Bowl Legacy Foundation at the time that I joined in 2015 only had about 20, 25 very hyper local donors, and they're very important donors. But with the Rose Bowl name on a global national scale, there was so much upside. So I think being able to come in there and understanding the weight of this history and what that means moving forward without abandonment of where we've come from, there was nothing but upside and ceiling. The nonprofit side of the Rose Bowl was largely unexplored and fairly new. That was daunting and exciting at the same time. We are owned by the city of Pasadena. We're operated daily by an operating company that has a publicly appointed board by that city council. And then there's this nonprofit, this private nonprofit that supports a public building. So I'm very proud of what we've been able to do in raising almost $80 million in that time frame that I've been there. But at the same time, it's a unique bird. It's getting the Neiman family to give money to essentially City Hall in a way. And I think that's in its simplest form. But when you think about what these people are giving to, they're giving to these generational emotional memories that are tied to that rose stem logo, whether it's on New Year's Day or a concert night or a flea market or a soccer match, whatever it might be. And I think that really every day when I unlock that gate and go in there, you think, gosh, I can't believe I have keys to this place, number one. But it really, I think, is easy in understanding. We turn 103 years old at the end of October. This place is always going to be bigger than you. It's always going to be bigger than everybody. Every time we open our gates, it's going to be somebody's first time there. It might be their only time there. Like how do you bottle up that feeling and that emotional generational aspect of such a key place in Americana and global sports and entertainment to really transact it to a way of genuine relationship based fundraising. And so I every day I thank God for being in that building and having a key to it, because it's easy to really hit you across the nose really quick that this brand will always be there. It'll be there well after I'm gone. You just hope to maybe touch it in a way where you make it a little bit better, before you walk out and move on.
Well, you've made it a whole lot better, thus far. And I mean, what a legendary place. They don't call it the
Hmm.
granddaddy of them all, the game, for nothing. And I did not know the city of Pasadena owned the place. So that's a
Hmm.
little bit more of a wrinkle, I guess, when you go fundraising. But the same
Yeah.
token, people will give to what they love and who they like, and I think that's a big part of it. Well, quick funny story. So we took the team to California many times,
Yeah.
and after we played Cal State LA one year, had them beat two, little Division two school, and we ended up losing. Anyway, we um, we went down to the Rose Bowl, and it was like the end of the day, is 5-ish, and we drove in. I'm like, I started walking down the ramp. I'm like, I'm going to get us in there. That's what I need to look. And the guy was so nice. He goes, man, love to do it. We're all closed up for today, and you just call us and we'll have you back. And I know I said I'm
Uh,
just taking the opportunity. We're in the area, and as you know, fairly good at that kind of stuff, but I couldn't get
yeah.
us in. I said I just want to look at the grass. That's all. I want to look at the grass.
Yeah,
So,
the grass is real, and I
oh,
bet you that guy is still there to this day. We've
you
had a
probably
lot
is.
of teammates that have been there for decades. Yeah, so that's awesome. You tried to get in.
I did. We tried. I've been pretty good about that kind of stuff. Quickly, last part of session one here. Just the day in the life of Dean Brozino, day to day at the Legacy Foundation. What's your days look like? I know you're making calls and visits, and
Mhm.
I'm sure it's multifaceted.
Yeah, it is. Every day is different, and I know that sounds cliche to say that, but fundraising takes many forms. Friend raising is a part of that. Where are you getting new relationships, and how can you be patient in those relationships to make it through a year, 5 years? You can't make somebody give, and I think it goes back to your earlier point. People give to people first, the idea second, and that genuine relationship is so important. So those relationships transcend a variety of different verticals for me. So general nonprofit fundraising, government affairs, and politics is a big part of what I do. At Long Beach State University, every major university has a government affairs department and a lobbyist. That kind of falls on my shoulders. It's an interesting bird being up in Sacramento and DC and talking about what we have to talk about. But I think in general, the friend raising component is probably paramount. And how do you really bottle up these generational memories that every walk of life has, whether they're an elected official or a true donor? And it all stems from relationships. So um, the through line, though, is connection on those relationships, connecting generations to this 103-year-old place, past to the future, connecting people to moments that matter. I mean, it gives you a relevancy in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Austin, Texas, Seattle, Washington, Washington, D.C. It's kind of has this flashy, cool factor to it, almost like having a nice alternate uniform for your baseball team. You know what I mean? It creates this through line that everybody can identify with. So every day is different. It's hard to describe what I do, but I love it. And I tell people I'm in the business of friendships and relationships, and the rest take care of itself if you do it right.
Multifaceted indeed, Dean. And in fundraising 101, it's cultivate the Nymans of the world to like you and give you a buck or two. And once I do, it's stewarding, right? You steward
Yep.
them and make them feel special. And I always said, in sales, the penny order is important to the person that ordered it, whether it's a dozen T-shirts for the cheerleading team or 100 football uniforms. That person that ordered it, that's pretty important to them. And I think that's how fundraising goes for the most part. Visiting here with Dedan Brozino from the Rose Bowl. Since 1909, Baseball Blue Book has been the trusted directory for MLB scouts, and today it's grown into the most comprehensive platform in the game. But it's not just for players and coaches, it's for businesses too. Inside the Baseball Blue Book app, companies can create full profiles, promote their products or services, and even build private groups to connect directly with players, parents, and coaches. Whether you're offering training, equipment, nutrition, or any service that touches the game, you now have a direct pipeline to the baseball community. If your business wants to stand out, it's time to get in the book. Download, download Baseball Blue Book today from Apple or Google Play. Again, back with Dedan Brozino from the Rose Bowl Legacy Foundation and also the Chief Development Officer as well, right? That's the other
Yeah.
part of that.
You
Yeah, and
got it.
you're good at doing this thing. Um, so I want to talk about this stadium, this iconic place that, I drove the van into the parking lot and was unable to get in. What makes it so special? I mean, it's pretty obvious a lot of ways, but that connection with Pasadena and, it's
Yeah.
a whole parade. You can kind of go into that whole year, a whole week. I'm sure it's more than a week too, but what makes it so
Yeah.
special?
Yeah, I mean, we're known for January 1st. It's America's New Year's celebration. New Year's is so special for all of us for different reasons. You're starting new, you're starting something fresh. I think the Rose Bowl Stadium and the Rose Bowl game really kind of sprinkled that Americana on that. But I think, you know, it's America's stadium because it means something different to everybody. Some people remember the granddaddy of them all on New Year's Day. Some people remember us as the home of UCLA since 1982. Others a concert. We had a music festival on our golf course, which we do quite frequently now. We actually do more music than we do sporting events annually now. We had a concert on our festival grounds, our golf course, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and a lot of those people there, that was their first time there, and they have zero idea that we do anything on January 1st. They have zero idea we do anything on Saturdays in the fall. And I think, it's kind of laughable, but at the same time, it's really cool that there's this generation of fans of something that we are checking the box on. And it's not football. It's not the CFP evolution. It's not the bowl system. It's not major stadium shows. It could be the flea market that happens once a month, or the show that happened on the festival grounds. And I think when you look at a place that's 103 years young, um, that's a really generational, emotional place where memories kind of collide with different milestones of your life. UCLA's been here for 40 years. The Rose Bowl game's been here for 103. After coming here from another location in Pasadena. So the stadium's really put Pasadena on the map. But I think what we're most proud of as a staff is, anything lasting 103 is a huge, huge deal. Especially a venue, yeah, a stadium. These major stadiums in the professional ranks, they last 25, 30 years tops if they're lucky before a major, major facelift or knocking it down and starting fresh. And for us to continue to kind of reinvent ourselves through the evolution of college football, the bringing in of UCLA, the evolution of now UCLA in the Big Ten and the CFP playoff model and concerts, doing more music than sporting events. I mean, I think that's pretty cool when you look back 103 years when we had one event per year, and that was on January 1st. So just that evolutionary cycle, I think, is emblematic of, kind of what we need to do in life, and that's be nimble and be accepting to new things that might come our way, good and bad.
The history and the tradition and the nostalgia and all that stuff is kind of paramount, obviously, to the stadium and to the community, and to that's what the foundation is basically. So obviously, you talk about renovations and things like that. How do you balance that? How do you handle that innovation for
Mhm.
the future, and without jeopardizing the integrity, I guess, of the grounds, the hallowed grounds.
Yeah, there's an art to it, especially when you're city owned, your municipal facility. That's very unique. Like in my identification, I think we're one of one nationally of people that have this sort of management ownership structure, but have this private philanthropic arm that supports the betterment and the enhancement of the venue as it continues to age. And Warren Buffett had a quote, that somebody is sitting in the shade today because somebody planted a tree a long time ago. And I think we can't forget where we came from. Like that's so supremely important. But at the same time, if we also stand flat-footed on the shoulders of our past, we're gonna crumble and we're gonna age, and it's gonna look a little bit more expeditious in nature of us going down than maybe it should. And so I think every capital improvement we look at, right now we're in the middle of an $80 million capital campaign. It'll take us up to and through the Olympic Games, which is our third in 2028. This $80 million facelift has had to be very thoughtful. How do you blend the new expectations of the fan experience, what you and I might expect when we go have a hot dog at a ball game, and what is the video board experience like? What is the ingress egress like? What is the parking like? There's a lot of things that we're beholden to because we're 103. We can't change the ingress egress. We're in the middle of this beautiful neighborhood and this beautiful open space, and those things we can't change. But what can we control? And how do we change the temperature of those things that we can control? So a lot of what we do has it rolls through city approval processes. It rolls through historical approval processes. We're actually one of four national historic landmark stadiums in the United States. It's us, the LA Coliseum, Harvard, and Yale. And that's awesome to have that plaque on the wall from the Department of the Interior in DC. But with that plaque comes a tremendous amount of responsibility in how you do things, how you wash the concrete, how do you treat it, what can you jackhammer and get rid of, what can't you? And so I think it's nice to have those donor dollars in support of what we're doing, and also the revenues from the stadium, because the stadium supplements even more so what the foundation does with revenues they generate from concerts and football games and things. We can't just take those dollars and apply them to what we think is the coolest thing for that moment. It's working with our key partners like UCLA, the Pasadena Tournament of Roses, our music partners. What makes life easier for a major U2 show or a Rolling Stone show when it comes in. What makes it more plug and play for those people to maybe look at us as a venue for the now and for the future versus a venue that was great 20 years ago. So it's a lot of collaboration, and I think you're going to hear the tone throughout this podcast. Just you said it in your books, like being relationship driven, being genuine, being transparent. We have to be transparent. We're owned by a city, and so living in a fishbowl is kind of what we wake up thinking about. It's what we go to bed thinking about. And I think that's really kind of trained our muscle memory in a way where we're automatically thoughtful on a lot of what we do because we want it to work for the next generation of fan. Absolutely. But the last thing we want is for this venue to get renovated and 80 million goes into it and it feels like a blip of its old self, because that's not why you took the team bus over there to try to get in there that day. That's not why I took the job 10 years ago. You want it to feel like it does and kind of draw out all those emotions that it has for generations.
Yeah, that collaboration part, Eden, I think is something that I didn't know coming into this today, and I think it's pretty cool and just adds more complexity to what
Mhm.
you've got to do. But I think for most people, the majority of people would have no idea about that. In this first half of, this little visit, that's a major piece of information that I think people are willing to listen to and respect even more so the job that you're doing. Tell me one thing that's like, yeah, this is why I do this. Did you have one of those moments of
Oh,
something that that you had
yeah.
going on?
Gosh, it's probably a pretty normal one, but the flyover gets me every January 1st. The B-2 bomber. I mean, it like I'd mentioned earlier, January 1st is very Americana in terms of, we celebrated on New Year's Eve. You wake up, it's about renewal, a new chance, a chance to reinvent yourself. That's why gym memberships go through the roof that first month, right? Then we all drop them. But it's about committing to something new. So that flyover is pretty special for me, myself, and a couple of my teammates that have been with me for that decade long um, tenure so far at the Rose Bowl. Like there's certain spots we like to go and kind of take in that moment. And like, to be honest, like this will be my, I think, 11th Rose Bowl game coming up here on New Year's Day, and I can't tell you that I didn't tear up on one of those. It's a very emotional 10 seconds. When you're at the end of that national anthem and that bird comes at you. So that's kind of on the bigger scale. I think on a smaller scale, a lot of the money we've raised has been around the history of the building. We put up 6 statues, we put up historical markers, we have a museum and the State High School Football Hall of Fame for California. So it's not just getting money for a new video board or a new field club project. That's part of it, but we've engaged these fan bases around the country around certain projects. And one of the more recent ones we did is we put up a statue for the all-time winningest coach at UCLA, Terry Donahue. He's got the
Okay.
all-time wins record in the Pac-12 as well, which will probably stand with the state of college football conference alignment. But just to see the near 200 donors surround that project, a lot of those 200 donors were his former players, Troy Aikman, Jonathan Ogden, Hall of Famers, gold jacket people. And to see them come to talk about Coach the way your former players talk about you. And, you see that going back to the state, we were talking earlier about the stadium brand being bigger than I'll ever be, or any of my teammates' careers will ever be, any fan's life will ever be. To see a coach and a figure kind of have that impact on people that probably he'll never realize the depth and the breadth of what that means to that singular person. Um, that Donahue statue was special to me because around Terry's feet we did 151 roses as part of that sculpture, and each of those roses stood for one of those record wins, a road win, a home win, a bowl game win, whatever it might be. And you're getting these former players saying, I want to sponsor the Rose against BYU in 1988.
Hmm.
And which is a mid-season, not well-known game. and they're like, "Oh yeah, well, coach gave this halftime speech, or he gave this speech between the third and fourth quarter that he said this thing. I still repeat that to my kids to that day. I'll never forget that moment because we came out of that huddle, we stopped them on fourth down, blah 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 blah." And in my head, I'm thinking Rose Bowl game, I'm thinking Cotton Bowl, I'm thinking conference
Uh,
title game, whatever it might be. And so I think that's the power of sports, though, right? Is there's this connectivity that ignites something in a competitor, in an athlete at any given moment. And so just being able to see the emotion of twofold, one, me experiencing it personally with that flyover, but getting to also experience that emotion through other people's experiences at that venue, and in particularly through Coach Donahue at that moment, was really, really special, because those moments would have been good, but they add a different layer when the story they're telling is in the locker room at the Rose Bowl in the 80s or whatever it might be. So um, those are probably the stories that are two of the stories that best kind of capture the emotion and the mission of the venue. It makes my job a little bit easier for sure when you have these people that have these visceral memories in a very positive manner about the place, and it doesn't always necessarily surround the final score. It surrounds the popcorn hawker and how friendly the usher was, or purely the game moment that they had with their family of four that day. I mean, there's a stimulation to starting that conversation a lot easier because it's the Rose Bowl, and those moments are woven throughout.
those are all straight lines, by the way. I always tell the story, and I'm not going to do it today as I want to spend more time talking with you, but straight lines. So the popcorn vendor and the ushers and the how nice they are, those are straight lines. Or if they're
Mhm.
not, the usher's miserable and the popcorn guy's spilling stuff everywhere and the beer I mean, whatever. Those
Yep.
first impressions are enormous. And that's what people remember. Like minor league baseball, they don't remember the score, they remember what the experience was. They couldn't even tell you who's playing, but they do remember, the taste of the hot dog and how friendly everybody was and
Yep.
all that sort of thing. Visiting with Dedan Brozino and Straight Lines. Dedan we're talking some leadership next, but I'm sure you don't have any team killers, or you try to recognize those from when you can. In every workplace and every team, there are unforeseen forces that can derail success. In my book, Team Killers, I uncover the behaviors, attitudes, and habits that destroy chemistry and show you how to build a winning culture instead. If you're a leader, coach, or teammate who wants lasting success, this book is your playbook. Get your copy of Team Killers today and protect your team from the inside out. Available at coachneiman.com. Will be a new website coming very shortly. And of course, Amazon. You're putting up an Archie Griffin statue as well, right? Is that on? Is
Yeah.
that up or on? Yeah,
No,
that guy was
yeah,
pretty
it's
good.
up.
It's up. Yeah, that was my growing up heyday. Okay, two Heisman's, I think, two Heisman trophies, and I mean, what an amazing back at the Ohio State University.
That's
Pretty good
right.
player. Pretty good player. I want to talk some leadership with you. So you can't do this by yourself. So tell me about your team and how many people you have around you, and kind of what you do and what you've got to do to lead them and inspire them.
Yeah, no, it's a good. We're actually, for being a very small city on a major event day like a concert, a football game, whatever it might be. We're actually a staff of only about 40 to 45 people at the stadium. From the grounds crew right on up through marketing and executive leadership, and the foundation component, though we actually only have three. So the nonprofit organization's three people. It was one when I got here 10 years ago. We've slowly grown it. So everybody on the staff grinds. It's not about having a staff of three. It's about, what can we leverage and utilize to grow from what we have. And I think, you know, good leadership is about paying it forward. How do you give others a chance to succeed by empowering an intern, empowering a coworker, trusting the fact that the person behind you in the batting order is gonna get it done, or the person in the huddle is gonna execute the right play and not miss a block, whatever it might be. Paying it forward is a huge reason why our small team executes on a very, very high level, on a premier level, in my opinion, one of the best in the world from a venue management success rate. That's why we do it. And we were just talking about Coach Donahue a little bit. He always would say incessantly that opportunity is a precious gift, and how often we give it and how we respond to it when it's given to us shapes everything. And I think we leverage the heck out of that at the Rose Bowl Stadium because we have a small team. We have nothing. We have no choice but to pay it forward and to offer that opportunity to others, and hope that we're all going to kind of rising tide lifts all boats. So I think it creates this very titleless environment, which is awesome, to work with teammates that are in the huddle and not feel an everyday hierarchy like there is by business card title or whatever it might be. But I think the other thing that really is symbolic of our small staff that has really been a philosophy of our CEO, Jens Wyden, is to just get after it. We have to start. When you do anything, it ultimately adds up. You stack up small wins, you move the runner over, whatever it is. But when you do nothing, it amounts to zero. So try things, be thoughtful, learn, be okay stubbing your toe, but you have to start. And I think for a venue that's 103 years old, to want to think about playing offense, not defense, that's a huge difference maker, right? We could very easily sit here on our hands, play defense, talk about the woe is me, we're 103, let's hope the phone rings and somebody wants to help us, or you can go out and attack it and create your own offense. And I think that's a huge part of life, right? Is you got to start, go have the conversation, walk into the room and start networking when you don't know anybody. Say hello to somebody. Kindness doesn't cost us a penny. And we all have the opportunity to do little things like that to change a life or change a business or to change our own day. And I think those two philosophies, just offering opportunity and accepting the trust that comes with that, but also starting instead of just sitting and waiting, those have tremendous trickle down effects on life, let alone our organization.
Without a doubt, just great lessons for folks listening, no matter how old you are. I mean, I'm started a second career, if you will, after retiring from the sales. And I think being a lifelong learner, sharing experiences, sharing alleged wisdom over the years, I think is important. And not only for me, but obviously for younger folks that want to stay on your path. It's such a legacy driven profile at the Rose Bowl. Have you learned anything early on that, maybe wasn't quite a straight line? Maybe it was a leadership lessons that you might have changed?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if I could turn back the clock, I probably would have embraced mentorship, formal mentorship, a little bit earlier. I think mentors are critically important, especially at a young age. But I also think they evolve through life. So it'd be easy for you and I to sit here and say, "Hey, we're accomplished, we're doing good things." You just mentioned you started a second career. Guaranteed, you've talked to several people, more than a handful, about what it takes to do what you're doing at the high level you're doing it with, whether it's authoring best-selling books or having a podcast. So I think mentors are critically important. Um, a mentor that I had at Long Beach State that helped me kind of move through life and through my career, he always used to quote this Charlie Munger quote to me and say, "The best source of new work is the work that's on your desk." Meaning, like, how can you expect opportunity tomorrow if you're not concerned with being excellent today? Do what's in front of you and don't wait and chip away. And I think that's really, I guess, a patient moniker as well, because I think a lot of times, especially in today's world, everything's readily available on our device. Everything's readily available out here in LA. You're judged by what you drive, what you wear, where you live, how big's your home. And it's easy to get caught up in status. And I think that makes people very fidgety in how they move through life. And it peels away patience that is required for success. And you always think the grass is greener on the other side, or another opportunity, another job. Well, sometimes the grass is greener right where you're standing, right? And if you just handle what's on your desk and handle what's in front of you, start stacking up those wins, advance the runner, same thing. Like, that patience breeds success. I think another leadership lesson I would have really maybe tried to embrace a little bit more at a younger age, is the fact that tough times make tough people. Saban used to preach that. A lot of coaches, Urban Meyer used to preach that. And that I get a lot of that from my upbringing in Lehighton and the jobs I had through high school, and really the mentorship of my grandfather, a World War II vet. You're not going to grow without those tough times. Like, how are you making yourself uncomfortable? kids and college kids, they try to avoid that uncomfortability, right? What's the easiest path to study for this test? What's the easiest way to get a sandwich for lunch, to get this job? And it's in those moments of uncomfortability is where that growth happens because we stretch ourselves out. We've had a tremendously tough year out here at the Rose Bowl Stadium. For as good as we're doing, we've also had some tough times. You come out of COVID, a new stadium opens up in Los Angeles. That's a competitor. You're starting to generate a new type of business through UCLA moving to the Big Ten, the CFP evolution, more music, and then bam, Eaton Fire starts on January 7th. And 6 days after the Rose Bowl game, the paint and the confetti is still on the field, and the whole world around Pasadena shuts down because of this wildfire. And all of a sudden, you go from being one of the most premier sports and entertainment venues in the world to a command center for 5,000 first responders that are literally trying to save people's homes and lives. And it comes at you really, really quick. And, again, those tough times kind of made us who we are. We could have sat and moped and said, well, we lost a month of business and, now we got to reschedule all these events and we lost a month of revenues, et cetera, et cetera. How does that affect fundraising? How does it affect, just our core competencies? But, we're better for it. That arguably that 4 weeks in January was maybe the most important event we've ever hosted in 103 years. And we should be very proud of that. Did it give us some scar tissue? Absolutely it did. But that's usually what strengthens the joints, right? And so I think, rising to the occasion, not falling to the level of preparation, so to speak, we had to be ready for that. If we were flat-footed to some of the earlier things we were talking through in the interview today, we wouldn't have been ready to be nimble and host those 5,000 first responders and give the community what it needed. And the community doesn't always need a football game and a concert and a flea market. They need us to be what we are. And that day it was a 300-acre footprint that could host first responders and save things. And
I
so
think
it's tough.
people ask me, like, do you remember the wins? You remember, I didn't know a whole lot. I remember getting the World Series and being Otterbein at the time, but I don't
Mhm.
remember a whole lot of them. And it's kind of the same with the 5,000 first responders, I think. What else? It's only about all the games and the concerts. And the thing you'll probably most remember down the road is the thing that was probably most important to the community and what was provided was hosting those first responders. And when you're
Yep.
in my vintage age, that's probably what you're going to say. You're going to say, you know what? That was the thing I remember the most. Visiting with Dedan Brozino, the president of the Rose Bowl Legacy Foundation, young man building his very own legacy. When the game is over, what will people remember about you? My book, What is Your Legacy? Challenges leaders, athletes, and everyday people to think beyond the scoreboard. Its purpose, impact, and the mark you leave on others. If you're ready to define your legacy and live it with intention, this book will guide the way. Get your copy of What is Your Legacy today and start shaping the story only you can tell. We're going to head into the last segment. I told you to go fast. Crazy. Um, there's so much going on at the Rose Bowl, no question about it. Any kind of memorable stories, funny stories? We talked about the first responders. I thought that's terrific. But then anything kind of like, whoa, what's going on here?
Yeah, no,
Or
2015 was
game?
my first. Yeah, no, for me, it's kind of a behind the scenes thing. My second day on the job in 2015 was actually the day of our first country music show ever. It was Kenny Chesney, Jason Aldean, Old Dominion, tremendous lineup. But
Heck of a
Chesney
day.
was the headliner. Yeah, and it was my second day on the job, so of course I was late. I was trying to be on Lombardi time, but I was late because LA's got a little bit more traffic up in that way that I was expecting. So lesson learned there, but um, we had learned going into that concert in my early days at the Rose Bowl that Chesney was just a huge college football fan. He still is to this day. He performed on College Game Day recently, and well, at the time, one of the first projects I had to do at the Rose Bowl was raise money to name the press box after Keith Jackson. Keith Jackson is the voice in all of our heads, and had the pleasure of getting to know Keith and Turi Ann and the family before his passing, before COVID. But knowing that Chesney was this incredible college football fan, we said, hey, why don't we introduce him to Keith? So our former CEO at the time, we arranged during the pre-show meet and greets, the American Express black card, they all meet Kenny. Well, the last person that he meets is Keith Jackson. We walk him out, and it was like a kid seeing Santa Claus for the first time. It was awesome, awesome, awesome to see that emotion flow from a superstar like Mr. Chesney. Um, so Kenny had about 3 hours to kill before the show, and he invited us on to his tour bus. Now this is like the second day on the job for me, mind you, and so we go
Wow.
on the tour bus, and it's myself and our CEO at the time, Daryl Dunn, and Kenny, his father, Keith Jackson, and like one or two other people, and um, didn't say much during those 2 3 hours on the bus, but you heard this incredibly in-depth storytelling about college football, about life, about everything in between. And Kenny's handler brings him his cowboy hat. That's kind of the signal, like, hey, we're ready for you out there. So we leave the bus, and I'll come back to the Chesney part, but we leave the bus, and in the compound around Kenny's bus are all these incredibly well-known celebrities. Well, I've seen a lot in my time at the Rose Bowl. Very fortunate to have been around them, and you don't get kind of excited around too many. But there stands Vince Vaughn, and I was a huge Vince Vaughn fan. Just going through college, they had all those great movies, Wedding Crashers, and et cetera, et cetera. And I kind of froze up. I didn't know what to say to Vince, but I could remember he was from Chicago, and you're a baseball guy, so you'll appreciate this. And I froze up, but I could remember he was a Chicago sports fan. And the day or two before, or maybe even the day of that concert, Cole Hamels had no hit for the Phillies, had no hit the Cubs, and I couldn't think of anything. So I said to Vince, I'm like, "Hey, how about that? How about that Cubs game today, man?" And he like looks into my soul and he says, "You are not effing funny." And that's all he said, and that's all he said to me. So I kind of froze up, and we go inside, we make amends. It was fine. I recovered from it. But the fallout of the Chesney interaction, he became a major contributor, the lead contributor to naming the broadcast center for Keith Jackson, which was awesome. He showed up to the dedication, showed up to the statue we put up for Keith after his passing. But we learned about it after Keith passed away. But the connection that Keith had with Kenny's father that day was one of fatherhood, not music, not sports. And Keith would call Kenny's dad frequently, weekly, to remind Kenny's dad how special Kenny was as a son. And I think when you think about like how things intersect with moments in sports and relationships, that came from a 3 hour interaction, and Keith did not want accolades for it. He did not want people knowing about it. We learned about it after his passing, and I'm sure to this day, Kenny's dad appreciated that, because it's easy in success and in our travels and in our growth through life to really become complacent as to like why we are the way we are, how we got to a certain point. But that day was special to me, not just because it was early on in my tenure, but because of the Chesney situation and also getting cussed out by Vince Vaughn. But as a guy from northeastern Pennsylvania, I guess I should feel prideful about that no hitter that day.
You say, hey, you know where the Eaton is? Come on
Yes.
land. We'll go bear hunting. What a great, great story. And I like to say, major leaguers and concert guys, and for the most part, people, they're just people,
Just
everyday
people.
people that are great, great people. And I always like to say the world is full of really good people. And if you can't find one, make sure you be one. And, it
Yep.
sounds like Keith Jackson's dad and or Keith Jackson and Kenny Chesney's father hit it off. And they're just people, right? They're just people. I want to talk a little about the global aspect of the Rose Bowl. You mentioned all the concerts and Super Bowls, but
Mhm.
the big thing coming up in 26 is that World Cup. What's that like getting ready for that? And does that affect your fundraising as well? I would guess it has some impact.
Yeah, yeah. We actually don't have the World Cup in 2026. We're sitting that one out, but we've had two World Cups. Yeah, we got the Olympics in 28. Yep. So we've had five
Oh, yeah.
Super Bowls, two
Okay.
two World Cups, three Olympics. So we're the only stadium on planet Earth that's had two World Cups and three Olympics. So we're excited about that. And the Olympic meetings are just starting. We will be the semifinals and the finals host for men's and women's soccer for the 2028 Olympic Games, which is kind of cool. We're as good as we are at football, we might even do soccer better from a venue standpoint and a sightline standpoint. So just working with the LA 28 Olympic Committee and understanding what their needs are. that factors into how we fundraise, the projects that we're looking to do, the projects that kind of put us on timeline to get done before they take over in the middle of 2028. And I think, we've done so many international events leading up to 2028. It's not going to be foreign to us, but it is a big stage. Anytime you get to be involved with a FIFA World Cup or the Olympic Games or the Super Bowl, it's just ratcheted up. Whenever you think you can't ratchet it up another level, that takes you two or three above and beyond. So, as we kind of get closer to that, more of our attention is going to focus on what we need to get better and to get ready for that. I think LA is really uniquely positioned for those 2028 Olympic Games. Almost all the venues are already here; they're already built. Versus when you see it in other cities, other countries, they typically try to build and raise these venues for those games, which is the ultimate timeline. And the fact that Los Angeles is somewhat ready and has that infrastructure, a lot of it is historic infrastructure, which is kind of cool from 1984 and beyond. Um, I think it's going to be fun, kind of sprinting towards the finish line and welcoming the world to the region. Kind of a unique thing. Pasadena is also going to have the Olympic diving at the Rose Bowl Aquatic Center. It's unaffiliated, but it's a couple of drivers and a pitching wedge away from America's Stadium. So we're going to have two Olympic events within a 100-acre footprint here in Pasadena, which is really, really special. I think when you think about what the world stage is going to be like with those eyeballs.
Yeah, two drivers and a pitching wedge, maybe for you, but probably been, from my end, not really good at that game. What's this look like in 10 years, 20 years? You're a forward thinker, envisionist, and pretty amazing what you're accomplishing. You know, any view of what the Rose Bowl might look like in 10 or 20?
Yeah, I think, we're at a flex point. We've had several chapters in our history, and we got great leadership from the city council, our boards, our CEO right on down that has really prepared us to think differently, think offensively in these times. Because, when the stadium was built in 1922 for $272,000, which isn't a whole lot, when it was built for one day a year. And then in 1982, UCLA came, and we went from one event per year to six or seven, and then we added music. And so we've had these evolutionary chapters throughout our history already. So I think it's easy to kind of get stuck in a vacuum, like, hey, this is it right now. I can't believe the playoffs changing. I can't believe conference alignment is happening. I can't believe we're doing music festivals. It's easy to really think about those moments with blinders on, but if you take those blinders off, this is just another evolutionary chapter in the stadium's long, rich history. So yeah, the landscape shifting, college football playoffs evolving, fan expectations are changing. Fans are more cared about. They care more about their smartphone being attached to a strong Wi-Fi signal than they do about, perhaps the parking, where that was very inverse not too long ago. So we have to stay adaptable. I think supporting our partners, the Tournament of Roses, the city, UCLA, while innovating around the guest experience is going to be key, because the next era has to be both historic and modern, and that's where a lot of those $80 million in projects come around. But I feel like we're battle tested. We've had that underdog mentality time and time again over the years, and like I said, because of things like the Eaton Fire and the shutdown of COVID that affected all of us, going from one event to now 25 a year that we have since we opened in 1922, we're kind of battle tested in that way, and the muscle memory has changed over the years to allow us to lead from the front versus follow from the back. And I think we're excited as to what might come. I don't have a crystal ball. Our CEO and our leadership don't, but I think when you're open to that fishbowl mentality, which we're kind of forced into because of our municipal ownership, you're always trained to just think around a corner. Setting up a hitter on an at bat for in the first inning for something down the road in the fourth or fifth inning. Setting up a play in the second quarter. You're not going to lose the game on an interception in the second quarter. You're not going to win it on a touchdown pass, but it plays into the whole game plan of what that 4-hour gameplay looks like, right? So we've kind of taken those first 103 years and prepared ourselves for something that might be a bit of a hiccup, but hopefully something that's a trampoline effect for the next generation to enjoy it like the past generation has here at the stadium.
I'm sure you continue to build on a wonderful foundation already. We talked about mentorship a little before, people we can count on, as I am, in this little bit of a transition. Um, what would you tell students, the Dedan Brozinos was at the Sales University? I think you're teaching as well. You still
I
teaching a
am,
class
yeah.
along?
Yeah,
So what do you
I teach.
tell these young students? What do you tell?
Um, I think a lot of progress is stopped in growth because people are afraid to ask and talk about it. And we all need help. Don't be afraid to ask for mentorship or advice and find what that help is. We have a critically important role in society to help one another and share with one another. Open yourself to that support. People want to help. I think you'd be really surprised when you ask somebody for help or you ask somebody to consider doing something for you, what they'll respond with. I think we think a lot of people are inaccessible because of what their stature is, what their title is, where they reside. I don't see it as that complicated. So ask for help would be number one. I think number two is success is very inconvenient. It doesn't care about your plans. Success doesn't care about your habits. So build good habits, stay uncomfortable, be reliable, be on time. Don't be me on the second day of work, not factoring in traffic in the Pasadena area. Um, Success is very inconvenient. It's easy to be average. So don't think of it that way. A third would probably be show up, be early, keep your word, care about the details. They separate you. I am fortunate to still teach a class at Long Beach State, and we talk a lot about personal development more than professional development. And I think, whether you're a father, we talk to our kids a lot about this, or a mentor, it, it's easy to tell people to be a one percenter. It's harder to follow those instructions to be the one percenter, right? I think of paying attention to details, handwritten notes, following up with a customized response. Those are things that are kind of a lost art form in a world where we're sending shorthand text message and memes to each other over a device in an informal manner when a relationship maybe is perceived closer than it actually is. Do you have permission to send those texts to people on that level of comfortability? So, caring about the details is huge. Getting them right the first time. Don't be wasting others' times because you wouldn't be wasting your own. That's a big deal, I think. And I think when you look back at whether it was my grandfather and his mentorship that I've mentioned a few times, or you as a coach, details are critically important. Where you spot that pitch is incredibly important. Not because he might hit it or strike out. It's part of the overall game plan. And I feel like in today's world, we all move so quick because of these devices in our hands and the screens in front of us. What are you doing to control your own temperature where your feet are at the moment and do some of those quote unquote old school things that got the world to this point, right? Like business was done eyeball to eyeball, face to face, handshake to handshake, way before the internet and email and all and cell phones and text messages. So why have we been so quick to abandon those professional and personal choices? So that's a lot of the advice that I continue to impart on it. Whether it's too simplistic or not, I don't know, but I do think those things matter nowadays more than ever because there's an opportunity to set yourself apart because nobody's doing those things anymore. So that would be what I would share with a younger self of mine.
I think you're spot on and perfect. I mean, you've been sensational today. What a wonderful visit we've had with Dedan Brozino. Now, thank you for joining me on Straight Lines. Remember, leadership is about drawing straight lines, even when life throws you curveballs. If you enjoyed today's show, share it with a teammate, subscribe, and connect with me on social media for more insights. And if you want to dive deeper, check out the two books, Team Gillers and What is Your Legacy? Until next time, lead with clarity, play with purpose, and keep your lines straight. Dedan, it was an absolute pleasure to have you. So good to see you again. I got on the bucket list to come out to the Rose Bowl. I got to do it.
You
So
got it.
thank you so much for coming on today, Dedan.
You got it. The gates are open. We got to make up for that bus trip. Thank you.